live stream works a little bit better than the last one because conferences was having an issue last time. But feel free to ask questions via voice and or typing, depending on which one you have. Otherwise, I'm just going to do random math stuff probably. But let me know if a question pops in. People that are here. So the thing that people tend to mess up with these is, again, the polygonal prisms and stuff. It always messes with people. So if we do, let's do a hexagonal one this time, and we'll do a pyramid just for fun. Boop. So maybe we had this hexa pyramid. Boop, 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 boop. Do-do-do. And we're going to say that the side lengths are, I don't know, 8 centimeters. And then we're going to say that the height of this guy is going to be, let's say, 12 centimeters. So since it is a pyramid, we are going to use that volume is your base times your height divided by 3. And so with that, first we have to be able to find our base area. And so since we have a hexagon as our base area, my base area is going to be apothem times perimeter divided by 2. And so in this case, we are going to have to solve for the apothem. So we'll do that here in a second. But our perimeter would be 8 times our number of sides, which is 6. And 8 times 6 is 48. And then that's all going to be over 2. So to solve for the apothem, remember that you are looking at kind of like this slice of the hexagon, okay? And you kind of have to know about the second half just so that you realize why you have to divide your angle measure by 2. But to get your apothem, you would take either number of sides, or sorry, 360 divided by your number of sides, and then taking that angle measure and dividing by 2. And so that would be a 30-degree angle at the top of this little triangle. And then this bottom half of this side would be half of your normal length. And so since it's 8, half of that would be 4. And then we're going to use trig to find our apothem. And so because this is opposite and adjacent, we would do tangent of 30 is opposite over adjacent. And so then since our A is in the denominator, remember if you wanted to show all of your algebra work, you would multiply by A, and that would give you A tan 30 equals 4. And then you would divide by tangent 30. So that's why I tend to just call it mathemagic, because I don't have to see all this work for me personally. But when you do that, you're going to have to pull out your handy dandy calculator, and my handy dandy calculator is not nearby me right now. So give me uno momento. But 4 divided by tangent of 30 would give us an apothem of 6.928. And so we'll just take that number, not rounded as best as possible. Boop. And so in my work, I like to just put little dots. But you can't really see it very well. But when you multiply that number times 48 and divide by 2, you get that your base area is 166.276, and that just kind of keeps going. So then you could take that number and plug it into the volume formula, because your base area is 166.276, blah, blah, blah. And then your height, we already know, is 12. And then that's all divided by 3. And so then, again, without rounding as long as possible, you multiply it by 12 and divide by 3. And that gives us a volume of 665.1 107. And so since it's 107, if we were to round to the nearest tenth, it'd just be 0.1. If we were round to the nearest hundredth, though, it would be not 2, 0.11. Ooh, there it goes. And that would be centimeters cubed, like that. Okay. Let's see what else is helpful with this unit. People, for some reason, have a hard time with naming these things, which is sometimes surprising. But remember, when we're looking at these different shapes, if they have two bases or two of the same shape, then they are a prism. And if they have one base, then it is going to be a pyramid. But you are naming these based on the shape of these bases. And keep in mind, they do not always sit on their base. For example, if I were to draw this prism, okay, by drawing this prism, it's not technically sitting on its base, which I'm sure some of you can see, but because of that, it doesn't change the name, because ultimately I have two of this shape. It does not matter about the other sides because I need two bases, and so this would be a hexagonal prism because there's two of them. And too often people come up with random names or randomly use pyramid. Keep in mind that a hexagonal pyramid would be something like this. Boop, boop, boop. Ah. I'm trying to draw it quickly, but it's not working very well. Something like that. Okay. What else? Identifying the edges and prisms, edges and vertices. Keep in mind that your edges are basically the lines. And so in this hexagonal pyramid, we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 along the bottom, and then 6 around the top. So we would have 12 of those. And then for vertices with this, you would just, normally it would have letters on it, but you're just counting basically where two lines come together. We'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that. And so on like the test, you'll just have to be able to tell me how many. You don't have to be able to actually name them. Another very common thing that people mess up on is being able to use the volume formulas to their advantage so that they can solve problems with them. And so, which the main one I'm thinking of is spheres, because spheres have a fraction and people are scared of fractions most of the time. But let me get rid of all this. There we go. So let's say we had a sphere and we knew this is just the most gorgeous sphere ever, I know, but we know that the volume of this sphere, and mind you, this may not work out very nicely, but we'll just say that the volume of this sphere is 108 pi, and we want to know what is the radius. So in order to be able to do this, you have to know what your volume formula for spheres are, which is 4 pi r cubed divided by 3. And then you take that value of the volume and you plug it in for the V. And so then that would be 108 pi equals 4 pi r cubed divided by 3. And so then to get the r by itself, because this is divided by 3, we are going to multiply by 3, not 2. Ooh, there we go. Multiply by 3. And by doing that, that helps get rid of the divided by 3 on the right. And so then 108 divided by 3 is 324 pi. And then that would be equal to 4 pi r cubed. And so then, because there is the 4 pi with this, I can divide by 4 pi. Boop, boop. And we're just going to come up here because I ran out of space. But 324 pi divided by 4 pi, your pi's would cancel, and that would leave you with 81 equals r cubed. And then because it is r cubed, you're going to have to take the cubed root of this. And you do have a calculator for it on most calculators, but if you don't, you can also put it to the 1/3 power. So FYI, if you don't have one, your way of manually entering this is your little exponent button and then 1 divided by 3. Because remember with radicals, you can rewrite them as exponents instead. But then the cubed root of 81 ends up being about 4.326. So if I said nearest hundredth, that would be 4.33. And I didn't say what the units were, so we'll just say units for that radius. Okay, so you really just have to be able to rearrange stuff in the formula themselves. What else? Most people don't have issues with length and width and height for rectangular prisms. Let's see. Oh, the thing that people mess up with the most with non-prisms would be the dividing by whatever you have to divide by. So in this pyramids case, we had to divide by 3, but I'm actually just going to steal this spot because it already has less to erase. But if it'll erase faster, but there we go. So if we had something like a cone, boop, boop, beautifully drawn. If we give you the slant height of the cone, so let's say this is 13, and then we'll say that the diameter is 10. Since the diameter is 10, that would mean that this side is 5. And so then you can figure out what your true height is because you can use the Pythagorean theorem. And so that would be 5 squared plus, we'll just say this is h, oops, can't see it, h squared equals 13 squared. And so then 5 squared would give you 25, and 13 squared would give you 169. And so then when you subtract the 25, boop, boop, that would give you h squared equals 144. And so then you would take the square root of that number, and that would give you that your height is 12. And so then if you're doing the volume of this, remember, since it's a cone, your base area is just pi r squared. Then you multiply the height and divide by 3. So since our radius would just be 5, we would have volume is pi times 5 squared times our height, which we just found is 12, all divided by 3. And so then 5 squared is 25 times 12 divided by 3 would give me 100 pi. And that would be in terms of pi. And again, I did not set a unit, so we're just going to say this is miles because we can. But that would be 100 pi miles, or if we actually multiply pi in, would be 314.16 miles, and that is rounded to the hundredth. Rounded to hundredth. Okay. Let's see. What other randomness can we come up with? And again, feel free to interrupt with any questions that you might have. But let's see. Cross sections. People mess up cross sections a lot because they overthink it too much. But all the cross section is taking a shape and cutting it and seeing what shape is left. So if we did some cross sections, I'm going to pull out my art skills real quick. But a cross section is always a two-dimensional thing. So if I had, let's say, a cylinder like this, that bottom's not very good, but a cross section would be like if I were to take this and just cut the cylinder this way through the shape. And in a way, you have to pretend like this is a stamper or something, because you can take off this front half of the cylinder, and then the shape left over is your cross section shape. So it's kind of hard to show in drawing form, but you can see that if you were to take a cylinder and cut it in half, it would end up just leaving you with a rectangle, because the cylinder would wrap around, and then you would just be left with a rectangle. But if I had a cylinder and I cut it this way instead, when I cut that cylinder, I'm actually going to be leaving behind a circle. And so here's the thing with cross sections: if they are parallel to their bases, then they should be the same shape as the base. But if they are perpendicular, then that's just going to change depending on the shape, because something like a cone, if you cut it perpendicular to its base, you end up just leaving yourself a triangle. Okay, and that's actually where all of your other conic sections come, which that's more so algebra 2 that you get into conic sections. But that is, again, they're always two-dimensional shapes, and people mess them up for some unknown reason. But if you had, let's say, let's get a little bit more creative than cylinders. But if we had, let's say, a pentagonal pyramid, we'll see how well I can draw this. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. If we had this pentagonal pyramid and I cut it parallel to its base, what I would be left with would be another pentagon. Like that. And so then that cross section would just be a pentagon. Yay! Other random math things that we can do while we wait for questions. Oh my gosh, I have so many random dots. Boop, boop, boop. What else? Again, the thing that people mess up on the most is just finding the apothem, and getting that area, which is not that hard. Not too bad. You just have to remember the steps. Nice. 3 of 11.2. Let me pull that one up real quick. Actually, do I already have the work written? Yes, I do. Okay, so the octagonal prism that has a height of 15. So for the sake of just having this, we know we have the octagon, and we know that these are 10 and that our height is 15. So first, to get that apothem, we are going to have to look at this little slice of the octagon, but remember we're only looking at half of that slice. And so if I draw that triangle a little bit bigger, I know this bottom side is 5 and PS. This is number 3 on the 11.2 worksheet. But we know that this side is 5 because it is half of your actual side length. And then to get the angle at the top, you do 360 divided by your number of sides, which would be 45 in this case. But then we divide that by 2 to get 22.5 degrees. And so then once you know that angle measure, you can use regular trig because we have opposite and adjacent. And so opposite and adjacent, remember, is tangent. So we would have tangent 22.5 equals opposite, which is 5, over adjacent A. And so since your A is in the denominator, we would go ahead and switch those around. And so that would leave me with 5 divided by tangent 22.5. And when we do that on the calculator, that gives you approximately 12.071. And so then keep in mind when you're doing volume for this, it is your base area times your height. But in order to get your base area, you have to do your apothem times your perimeter divided by 2. And so that would be 12.071, as that gets plugged in, times the perimeter. So 10 times 8 would give you a perimeter of 80, all divided by 2. And when you multiply and divide, that gives you a base area of 482.84. And so then you would take that number and plug it in for your big B in your volume formula. Boop. And multiply it by our height, which we said was 15, and that's given in the picture. So then when you multiply by 15, that gives you 7,242.6. And if I'm remembering correctly, the worksheet says nearest 10th. And yes, nearest 10th. And so then that would be millimeters cubed. Boop, like that. Okay. What else? You're welcome. Anytime. Are there other questions from homework worksheets or review? Okay. Let's see. Another random piece of information, don't forget that if it's an oblique prism, that's when they're all slanted and stuff, that the volume formula is still exactly the same, assuming it's not like made skinny in the middle or something. But if there are no more questions, though, from you guys that are currently watching, then I will probably be signing off, but I'll still be live tomorrow at 10 and 2 on YouTube, since this is the geometry conferences. But yeah, and we'll be live tomorrow at 10 and 2, and then you all will be getting a message from me if you have me as your teacher for anything that you may be missing. But we will see all of you later on the internets.